Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Leah Toms from the marketing team, and I'd like to welcome you to our Pulse webinar with an overview of the state of crypto agility, a countdown to 200-day certificates, MTLS and validation method deprecation, the deprecation of manual DCV methods, and SMIME and MPIC milestones. For our session, we have Tim Callan and Nick France here for you today. As always, the presentation will be recorded and we'll share it with you afterwards. And finally, if you have any questions during the presentation, send them our way. Please use the chat and we'll answer as many questions as we can at the end. Tim and Nick, let's get started.
All right. Hi, Nick. How you doing?
I'm good, Tim. How are you?
I'm good. We have a lot of material to cover today. So for you guys in the audience, we're going to be trying to go fast because we have a lot we need to get through. Okay. I'm not even going to go into this agenda. You'll see what they are one by one. So the first thing probably to talk about is that Sectigo recently released the results of our survey of enterprise decision makers about their crypto agility, in particular in reference to both their preparedness for shortening certificate term, the march down to 47-day certificates, and also with their preparedness for post-quantum cryptography. And these are released in a report that we have that you can get from us. There's probably a little plug for it at the end, or if not, well, we can get you a link. We can get that out to you where you can read that in detail. Also, we did 2 previous webinars where we focused specifically. One of them was on PQC preparedness and the other one was on 47-day preparedness. So we're going to hit some of the key takeaways here, but we're going to direct you to those other sources if you want to dig in more about this because it's really fascinating stuff. All right, so now with that, let's just share a few highlights. I think I've only got like 4 or 5 questions in here. The first one, how confident are you that your organization is tracking all certificates? And as we see, the vast majority of us are not really that confident, right? The 30% of people say that they're confident, which means 70% of people say that they're not. And that's a lot considering what's coming up.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was quite surprising when we talked about this, wasn't it, Tim? That we were, I think, shared concern that people weren't that very prepared just from understanding what their inventory looked like.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway there is if you don't know what your inventory is, then when these other changes come, you might find out the hard way, right? And we'd rather not find out the hard way because we have an outage or we have a breach or we have stolen secrets. What we'd rather do is find them ahead of time. So this is kind of a call to action to say, look, if you're feeling that way, let's do something about it. The good news is that understanding of the changes that are coming is extremely high among the people who manage their certificates. Look at this, 94% say, and you never get 100% on anything of these polls. You could, ask people who's the president of the United States and 6% of them would get it wrong, right? So this is like hugely dominant in survey world. It's not really surprising considering the massive amount of conversation that's gone around it, but I'm happy about this. This is encouraging. We want people to know, we want people to take action and plan and not get caught on their back foot.
Exactly. Yep. It's good that we've been talking about this enough that it seems to have taken root in people's minds, which is good.
Exactly, which is fantastic. All right. How prepared is your organization? I see a typo. I'll fix that. How prepared is your organization to transition to monthly renewals of public TLS certificates? Again, look at this. The very prepared is only at 19%, and a massive 81% are not really prepared for this. Now, monthly renewals are still a ways off, so you're not in trouble. But if you're not prepared for that, then you do have work in front of you that you need to do to get prepared so that you don't have a problem when the day comes. All right. And then this was interesting. I grabbed the top 4. To what degree are the following aspects obstacles to the adoption of automated certificate management? Like what's preventing us from adopting? And with this kind of thing, normally what we do is we look at a top 2. So the top 2 would be those gray bands on the right. the significant obstacle and critical obstacle. And so these are stacked in decreasing order of top two, right? So if you look at those top four, that's the order of how much of an issue this is. And these top four are interesting because I think they highlight two sets of things to worry about. One is the compliance or audit constraints and the security concerns. We can kind of lump those in together into, say, people feeling that automation fundamentally is a vulnerability for their organization, right? That if we put automation in place, we're not convinced at the end of the day that we're going to be safe in so doing.
Or they're not going to meet compliance obligations. We've heard a lot
Right.
of people say things like, I have to have multiple approvals in there to be able to
Right.
get a new certificate
Yeah.
or replace one, which is interesting and something I certainly feel needs to go away. You know, approvals for something that's short-lived is not really very necessary and probably detrimental, but it shows that people are concerned about that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely agreed with you. And then the second two I think also go together. Competing roadmap items and integration concerns. This is people just saying, I don't know how technically to implement this and have it fit in and work correctly with the stuff that I have. And so, you know, if we look at those as the key worries, then maybe that's what we need to go try to address, right? I think, Nick, you were hinting at the fact that compliance, to some degree, I think is solvable just by redefining how you think of compliance as a process, right? If you're requiring approval every time you replace a certificate, that's probably a bad rule, right?
Yeah.
And probably that gets addressed by changing the rule.
Yeah, I mean, these things can be changed, things like that, and you know, security, you know, roadmap items. These are all things that can be changed, but I also think we all have to acknowledge they're things that can't necessarily be changed quickly or easily.
And for the roadmap and integration thing, I think addressing that also is important, and it's a matter of addressing it to say, hey guys, it's got to be on the roadmap. It's gotta, right?
Yeah.
If we have to move other things, we have to move other things.
Yeah, these deadlines aren't changing, these timelines aren't changing, and you know, you're going to have to move things around to
and
get
the cost of downtime isn't changing, right?
No, that's very true.
Yeah.
The cost of outages, the cost of things going wrong with certificates is, well, I would say it's changing, Tim. I think it's getting worse. I mean, I think, you know, it's not
going away. The negative
it's not going away.
consequences of downtime are not going away. The negative consequences of a breach are not going away.
Exactly. Yep.
Right. All right. And then this one's interesting, right? Do you see overlaps in your organization's preparedness for 47-day TLS and PQC? So as we're working on one, are we working on the other as well? And nearly 50%, just a hair shy of 50%, see significant overlap or exactly the same, right? If you lump moderate in there, which is probably would have been a better way for me to do this, that's almost all of them, right? If we just attach moderate, significant, and exactly the same, you know, at that point, you're looking at 80%.
Yep.
So,
which is understandable, right? That's what we kind of, when we've done these talks before, Tim, when we've done these webinars before, this ability to be agile when it comes to cryptography, specifically traditional to post-quantum, having automation and short lifetime sets is a huge driver, and it's a huge reason to do it, and it's a huge advantage that you are agile, so when these changes come about you can change quickly. So it makes sense, it reinforces what we already knew, but it's good to see that the people we surveyed here also agree.
Yeah, and I think there's a good lesson on this, which is, you know, if you are working on that agility, and if you are working on that cryptographic bill of materials and these other things that we've talked about in other webinars, we talk about a lot, that can apply to both of these initiatives. And do it once, do it well, and reuse the work is what we recommend, versus having different individuals in different places taking different approaches to it, getting two separate things that aren't identical, that don't marry with each other, that are both trying to address the same problem.
Yep.
Right? All right. You know, as we did talk about, you know, getting this into the roadmap and preparedness and all of this, it's important to remember that there are a lot of stakeholders in these particular initiatives. So, you know, you may be thinking about not having an outage because that may be your mission, but there's someone else who's thinking about the efficiency of your employees, and there's someone else who's thinking about employee retention, and there's someone else who's thinking about compliance readiness, and there's someone else who's thinking about security. And all of these people benefit from having a CBOM, having a smooth transition to these other things, having high uptime, and having automated certs. And so as you're working on this, just think about all the different people in the organization who this touches and who are stakeholders and who care.
Yep.
All right. Told you we'd be fast. So, countdown to 200-day certificates. Let's give you guys an update of where we are right now. So first of all, why do we need shorter certificates? Because they're simpler.
I like that we shorten this. I like we've got it down, because usually that's the first thing on this slide. Yeah. Why are shorter lifetime certificates better? They are safer. The shorter amount of time that something bad is available for abuse or is out there, the better.
Yeah.
The billions of users that Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Mozilla all represent are kept safer when certificates are shorter, so that if something goes wrong, they are not out there for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 4 years. It's in the end 47 days or less, and that's a much reduced window of risk for people. So that's the main reason. Shorter is better. They are safer.
Yeah. And so there are some other benefits like improved efficiencies that come from using automation and improved crypto agility, where we can migrate things across more quickly, and all those things are valid and are other benefits that come as well. So we get a set of benefits and they're all great, and it's good that we get them all. So where are we in this process? So in 2020, since 2020, we've had 398 days as a maximum term. That's still what we have today. However, on March 15, 2026, that goes down to 200 days. Same time, March 15, 2027, it goes down to 100 days. And then there's a 2-year gap. And on March 15, 2029, it goes down to 47 days. Expect to get a regular check-in from us on where we are in this step-down process for the next several years.
Yes.
And this also is going to include a shrink in domain control validation reuse down to 200 days as well, which means that for every domain you get from the same CA, you'll have to re-DCV. Right now, you have to re-DCV once a year. This is going to become twice a year, essentially.
So everything's going to be done twice within, I think it's about 116, 117 days from today. Yeah, just over 100 days. Not that long, 200-day certs, 200-day validity for your DCV. So everything is going to be done twice a year instead of once a year. And that's happening very, very soon. And everybody's got to bear in mind, of course, it's not only 100 or so days. It's a Christmas period, it's Thanksgiving, it's the New Year, it's freeze periods, it's windows where no one makes any changes. There is not a lot of time. And while it isn't a 47-day, you've still got to be prepared. Yes, you've got to be on the right path.
If you're freaking out right now and you're saying, well, Tim, I'm never going to have everything automated by March 14th. Okay, how about this? How about if we get some of it automated? And in particular, what if we focus on the things where there are a lot of certs, where there's a lot of work, where you can knock out a whole bunch of your work and your risk for doing things incorrectly, get that automated. Or how about this? How about the real critical stuff, where if there's an outage, it's going to be really, really bad and we're going to be bleeding money. Get that automated. And if we can just focus, at this point, we're recommending a focused, directed scale. We first started discussing about this at the beginning of this year. And at that point, it was much more. But now, if you're in the position where you're not ready for this by March 15, think about what are the big sets of certs that I can knock out that will offload a lot of workload and a lot of effort and a lot of error potential. And what are the things that are really, really critical that I just simply can't have going down? And if you focus on automating those, then you'll have some extra time to deal with the twice the cadence on the rest of the certs, and you can be working on those after March 15th. And
exactly.
That is our recommendation.
Yeah, I did another webinar earlier, and I use the same phrase I use all the time on this. You're not letting perfect be the enemy of good, making sure that while nobody, I think, is going to achieve 100% automation straight away, though we'd all like them to, maybe even never. But there was a question about what if I've got really old legacy systems that I can't do automation? I think what you said, Tim, let's get all of the other stuff done, get all of the low-hanging fruit done, get all of the really critical systems done. And then when they are automated and they are kind of, you have peace of mind that they're not something you have to be concerned about. You get a notification when things break, but they work. You can then focus on the things that are requiring more attention, that are going to be harder to do, all of those
Yeah.
things. So it's about focusing on we don't have years and years left to do this and do a long rollout and attack everything. You've got to prioritize what systems you can look at. And so as it says here, you've got to go, it's risk reduction, not perfection. And you've got to go
Yeah.
after the high impact systems and the ones you can do easily. And then you've got time for the other things.
And then after March 15, 2026, imagine another version of the same thing. Because in another year, they're going to go down to a 3-month renewal cadence. So then you start to say, okay, what am I going to prioritize that I'm going to have done by then? And if it's not everything, which I recognize that it might not be, let's make sure that the ones that are left for very good reason. The ones that are extremely difficult. And then you've got 2 years to get that stuff done.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is yeah.
Not a long time left for the first step down, but it's not the hardest one. It will be more painful. It is twice a year versus that, but it isn't 12 times a year yet.
Yeah.
So we have some time. I think with those other presentations we do, Tim, where we do our nice, timeline, and like we said, it started in August, then September, October, and now it says it starts in November.
Exactly.
There aren't many days left.
It's very compressed.
There is still time. The one thing I did want to say that was a good question I got asked earlier as well is even after March 15th, when you can only get 200-day certs, the 1-year certificate you order the day before will still be valid. Okay, so that's people need to understand. It's there was some concern that if I get a 1-year certificate in February, will it actually be revoked after 200 days or 230 days or something like that? No,
Thank you,
it's
Nick.
important
That's
to remember.
A very good point. And with all of these changes, that's always how it goes. Which is, if there's a deadline, that's the last day you can issue a cert with the old rules. But that cert will live its full lifespan, unless it's revoked for some other reason. That cert will live its full lifespan, right? And so, yeah, if you, decide to get some things out of the way by deploying some certs in January and February to buy yourself a little more time, that's a viable strategy. And that's something you can do. And they will last for their full term.
Yep.
All right. MTLS and validation method deprecation. So we've got some deprecations coming. Let's talk first about client auth, mutual TLS. So there's a requirement that has come from Chrome that CAs will not be able to have a client auth EKU in public server certificates, public TLS certificates anymore. And this is part of Chrome's general initiative to clean up roots. They want roots to be single purpose. They want them to be clean. They want the number to be limited. They want them to be migrated out on a regular basis. And they want the whole thing to be orderly and easy to track. And there are a number of reasons why that's beneficial. And we can get into that another time. But, this is the policy and it is what's coming, right? And so the hard date, if I kind of start at the far end, June 15, 2026 is the hard deadline that Chrome has set, after which you cannot issue certificates with a client auth EKU. Now, when major changes like this come about, what we try to do is we try to prepare the market early. So we have 2 earlier deadlines that are worth calling your attention to. One is we've set our high deadline at May 15, 2026. So after May 15, 2026, our software just shuts off. That code is already deployed. Our software just shuts off and it stops issuing client auth EKU certs. It blocks anything that has a client auth EKU. And what that does is that gives us a chance to make sure it's all working correctly, to implement bug fixes and rollbacks and things like that should they be needed. And this is just a general best practice for us. But the other best practice, the one that's probably more important to all of you, is that one of the things we've discovered when big changes like this come about is that people get surprised. We've seen this with things like root expirations. We had a big root expiration a few years ago, and we went out to our enterprise customers and said, hey, this root's expiring, this root's expiring, this root's expiring, there's nothing to be done, this root's expiring, it can't be changed. And what we heard pretty across the board was, oh, that won't affect us. Doesn't matter, won't affect us, we don't need it. And I believe that those people really believe that, sincerely believe that. But then the day that root expired, we learned out that a lot of them were incorrect, that it did affect them, that they had stuff in place they didn't realize, custom root stores or pinning or other strategies that then broke and that they did not even know were in production. And so what we do to avoid that kind of problem, and of course at that point we couldn't give them the root back, it was gone, right? So what we do to avoid that kind of problem is we issue this soft changeover. And this actually happened on October 15 of this year, where our certs started going out without the client auth EKU. And we messaged it a lot to our customers, but that, that doesn't mean that everybody registered or understood that. And what we've done is this is in order to help people find the problems. So if you start getting certs and you start deploying them and something isn't working, now you know that you are dependent on that client auth EKU. Yep. And now you can go fix that problem.
It's one of these problems that, unfortunately, for a CA like ourselves, it's not something we can detect. We can't scan from the outside. We can't look at our customer base and go, oh, those people are using it and those aren't. That's not possible. Mm-hmm. And even as you said, Tim, we've done a lot of communication. You and I have done webinars. We've talked to customers in person about this thing before. Even if they are aware this is changing, they don't always know whether they're actually reliant on this feature or not. It's not always possible to tell. So what we've chosen to do with this timeline, and we feel it's been fairly successful, because we turned it off by default a month ago now. And if someone says, oh, it's broken or something's broken or we can fix it. We have several months to fix it, to educate them and to help guide them to better alternative solutions, as opposed to just doing this on June the 14th, 2026.
And as it says here,
there's no recourse.
As it says here, we can re-enable it for your account. And we have done this for some people. So if you have something that stops working and it turns out it's because you're dependent on a client auth EKU, what you do is you contact your account rep and you let them know that you need this re-enabled. And then we will re-enable it for that account. We'll agree with you on a time frame where we'll turn it off again, because you got to see that things are working. And then you have 60 days to fix the problem. And then we'll turn it off again. We'll give you some new certs and we'll confirm that it's working correctly. And that's how this is meant to be. It's a scream test, right? And there's no substitute for that. Like, no matter how much we all do research, at the end of the day, errors will be made if we don't actually pilot this in real time, in the real world. So we've discovered that this is a best practice. It works extremely well. And it's going on right now. So if you start seeing some funny behavior and it appears to be this, then that may be what it is, and contact your rep and we'll give you some new certs and you can get to the bottom of what's wrong.
Yep.
Yeah. So Nick, here are some of the possible things for people to work on, to look at.
Yeah. I'll do a little bit of background on this, because I think it is quite interesting with this particular topic. So for the longest time, CAs like ourselves, all of us, have included this client authentication EKU in server authentication certificates. And that's allowed that same certificate to be used to identify itself, or to do something called mutual TLS, or server-to-server authentication. And it's fine, but it's also not good. You're not really authenticating anything. Right, that's the key thing to bear in mind here. If you're using a public certificate to authenticate other parties or anybody to your systems, you are not authenticating anything. There is no barrier to entry to get a server certificate from any CA. There are many that give them away for free, and even the ones that don't, it's a relatively small amount of money, and it's checking someone controls a fully qualified domain name. Doesn't even need to be a domain name that they own. There's places where you can get, free FQDNs or dynamic DNS. So you're not really authenticating anything. And I think there's a big misconception, and it's partly because this has been available for many, many years, that it's actually some kind of strong authentication. It really isn't, because you are authenticating strongly cryptographically with a certificate, but you are not doing anything with the contents of that certificate. You're not verifying it. There's no MTLS system I've come across that does any checks as to the content of the certificate. They don't check the fully qualified domain names of the client certificate that's provided. So it really is a bad solution. And I think that's one of the reasons why Google are trying to drive towards this single purpose hierarchies: server auth for server auth, S-MIME for S-MIME, code signing for code signing, and to move client authentication to where it should be, which is a private CA use case. Now, there are a lot of common use cases for client authentication. And the ones that we've listed here, things like VPN access and Wi-Fi onboarding, and some of the other authentication, things like in the DevOps environments, they are all great, and MTLS is great, but they all work better and more correctly with a private CA. Because if you want your user to authenticate to you for a VPN, you want to know it's one of their users. You want to know it's one of your employees, for example. So you give them a private certificate, which you completely control, and then they authenticate back to you. What you're doing if you're using public server certificates is you're saying anybody that has, fingers and a credit card can authenticate to my system. And so that's why it's something that is bad, and it's why that's something that's being deprecated. And there are, alternative solutions that we can, offer here. There's the private CA, which is obviously the main thing. There might be some edge cases where you could use an S-MIME email certificate, because that does still contain client authentication, EKUs, and can be used to authenticate individual users. But you must bear in mind, if you look at that as a solution, you are essentially, authenticating, again, not really authenticating, but you are allowing access to anybody who is able to purchase an S-MIME certificate from any one of a number of CAs. Okay, so that's the barrier to entry. So while MTLS and client authentication is a great thing, it's a great use case, it's absolutely much better served and actually functional and does what you think it does if you have a private CA. And that's my rant over with that one, Tim.
I love it. Absolutely. So, I mean, these are the steps to actually deploy that private CA, right? This is what you'd have to do. You need to figure out what your PKR is, what your needs are, map your internal PKI as it says here, and then decide how you're going to put private CAs in place of that. And that's really your solution, because TLS certs are not going to be able to do that for you moving forward.
And I think one quick thing to stand at, one other option, of course, is a bit like we talk about with the shortening lifetime of server certificates. There is sometimes assessment that needs to be done to say, is this actually an appropriate technology? Right. The example I've used on previous webinars with you before is, if I have an SSL certificate and I can't automate it because it's on this big old mainframe system, does it really need a public SSL, public TLS certificate, the same as I might do on a blog about cats and dogs? And the same thing here. I'm relying on third-party CAs like Sectigo to provide a product that I tell my clients to go and get. I'm not doing any additional vetting and checking. Is that really a suitable security system? Am I really getting benefits there? And you might need to think about whether what you're providing either needs a private CA or needs some alternative kind of security instead. And one final comment on this, because it is a tricky topic. We are aware there are some third-party services that require this. And what I mean by that is there may be services that you and your businesses interact with that require you to have one of these certificates, a server cert with client authentication in, and it's not your system. You might be authenticating to an API. It's quite common, unfortunately, in the financial sector. if those happen, please do reach out to us, contact your account rep, open a support ticket, give us the details, because we are trying to work with those providers to kind of wean them off this and onto a solution that actually works. So if you do come across them, please let us know.
Great. Okay, so let's move on. So another big thing that's coming up is the deprecation of manual DCV methods. So
Yes.
there is a proposal in the discussion period now in the CA browser forum that would eradicate all of the DCV methods based on email, phone, fax, mail. And that is not a passed ballot, but I'm going to say I cannot imagine it not being a ballot that passes in a form very close to the form it's in now.
Yeah. I
So
think
if
as well,
anything
Tim,
happens, it'll be subtle.
this will be
Right?
one of those ones that because this is obviously in discussion as a
Mm-hmm.
ballot proposal, but it's also something that Chrome have talked about wanting to include as part of their policy. So I think it's another one of these things that we talked about over a few years where it's a sensible security practice. We do agree with it. If it doesn't get agreed upon in the CAB forum, I think it will be something that Google, maybe Apple, and maybe Mozilla and Microsoft as well will make
Yeah.
part of their programs, which makes it a de facto requirement anyway.
Absolutely.
I think we need to be clear on that, because this is another one of those places where, yes, we know there might be some pain, but it makes security sense. It makes good sense for us to do this. And if we, as a ballot can't pass to agree to that, it'll probably still get implemented and required
Yeah.
anyway.
And also, I think the ballot will pass. So
I agree with you, but we might
yeah.
see otherwise.
So these are the dates that are in now, right? The dates that are in now have two dates, March 2027 and March 2028. And in this time frame, you can see what's going to be removed, right? The phone call and emails to the phone call to text or CAA records, or the email to IP address contact will be going away in that kind of time frame. So if those are methods you're using now, you're going to have to stop.
Not all
and
CAs
then
use all of these methods. That's one thing
right,
to understand. So you and I would say, particularly the ones that are going to be
right,
eliminated in March of 27, I think we can agree to them. They're not particularly common methods, right?
correct.
I mean,
Yeah,
we certainly at Sectigo don't use telephone to validate someone's domain ownership. I mean, there
yeah,
is the option, as you can see there. It is possible. I think there is postal mail option, and it's quite
yes.
laughable, really. I
Mhm.
could look up your who is
In
on
fact,
timcallan.com and
hey,
send you a postcard from
but
here in
at
the sunny
least I
UK.
have a mailbox. I don't even have a fax machine. I
That's
think that's the more laughable one. But
that's true.
yeah,
Although there's
no,
some parts of the world where fax is still quite prevalent, I
that's
believe.
true. That's true.
But yeah, they are methods that are very manual, very prone to error, and quite honestly, the way these domains and who is and everything works, they just don't really do what they are claiming to do or what they are attempting to do, right? So those methods are going first. Anything that involves phone, fax, SMS, email, postal stuff, and email in the first case of March 27, it's email to an IP address contact, which again is weaker than the way that DNS names and domain names are done. So all of those are going away in March of 2027. Generally, I would say they're probably not impactful to most people because they are much lesser used domain validation methods.
Yeah,
However, March of 28,
yeah,
assuming the ballot passes with this particular timeline, is where we will start to see things getting more impactful, let's say. And I don't have data to hand, although I'm sure we will do this and present it at one of our other pulses, Tim, as to how popular and prevalent email validation is versus other methods. Certainly in our kind of base, we can probably do some analysis there. And we have a colleague who's probably got that data on hand, and I will suspect that email validation in any of its forms, whether that's constructed email, which is where we send to admin@yourdomain.com, or the other methods where we can find an email from DNS records, those are all going to go away. And I know they are relatively popular. I know they are much more prevalent in the enterprise space, where they have a lot of domains and they perhaps don't have DNS fully automated today, or DNS is managed with a separate team. So I think we are going to see some some friction here with this deprecation, because it's only, a couple of years away. It's 2 years and, 100 and so days, potentially, although it hasn't been agreed upon yet. This is probably the real timeline. So we are going to see that deprecation of email validation be a problem, I think. And the answer, of course, is to move to DNS-based validation, because that is safer, more automatable, and generally better to prove control of fully qualified domain names.
Yeah, and this also helps with other initiatives we talked about. It helps with your own efficiency, and it helps with prevention of errors and all the rest.
Yes, it's
All right.
better, let's say.
And
But DCV is changing generally, isn't it?
Yeah, DCV, and this is only part of generally a lot of stuff that's happening to DCV. So the first bullet here, the deprecation of manual methods we just discussed. But also connected to shortening certificate lifespans, I think we referenced this, DCV reuse periods are dropping as well. So as you see here, it'll be every 6 months on March 15. It's going to go down to every 3 months starting March 15, 2027. And then at March 15, 2029, it will be down to 10 days, which is going to be, mighty close to new DCV every time that you get a new cert, right?
Yep.
So that's getting into the ballpark of, DCVing every single certificate, unless you're doing them in close proximity for some reason.
Which let me just say, Tim, some people do. We certainly have customers who are DCVing every single certificate issuance and reissuance to the tune of tens, if not hundreds of thousands a day. And I say that so everybody is aware that it is eminently possible to do that. With automation,
if you're automated.
If you're automated and you have it tied into your DNS, which you should do, if not now, you will need to in the future, it is absolutely possible to automate the request, validation, and issuance of every single certificate, and each one of those need only take a few seconds. And I'm saying that because I don't want there to be any misconceptions that the idea or a goal of validating every single certificate is a bad one or an unachievable one. It is absolutely not. It is something that is eminently possible. And if your organization feels like you could do that and you have the automation ready to validate every certificate, we can help you do that. You will be well safe into the future. You will not have to make any changes. This 10 days could come down to every day or every issuance, and you're already there. You don't have any more pains and hurdles to get through. So I just wanted to make sure people are aware it's possible.
Great. And there's another tool that could help you with this. That just very recently passed ballot from CA Browser Forum, and it is called Static DCV. And the basic idea is that you can modify your DNS record to indicate that you're the owner of this domain, and then that same record, that same change to the record, can be reusable beyond these deadlines. So we still have to go do DCV every 200 days or 100 days, but the same change you made to your DNS record can be used again in the future. And it means that you don't have to go in and do this work multiple times and do it in real time. This is also configurable to expire by the subscriber. So a lot of people, I think, properly are not comfortable with the idea of I'll put something in my DNS and then maybe I'll forget about it, and then 10 years from now somebody's using that to get a cert. But you can put expirations in there, and then you can run it for a certain amount of time that you consider to be safe, and at the end of the day you can go update that record. And this is something that is available as a principle that I think you'll see CAs rolling out, and I think you'll see us rolling out in the specific use cases where it makes sense. So this will help as well. You want to add to that, Nick?
No, I was going to say it's a newer method. I think there's some areas where it's very useful, some perhaps where it might not be. Most CAs, I think, will offer it to some extent. And I may be wrong on this, but even though it is a static record, it's a static record in that you don't have to necessarily update your DNS all the time, but it's still something that we have to check more frequently. So we will still have to. So if there's an issue with your DNS, or you take the record out, or the record's improperly formatted, that is going to block issuance and it blocks domain validation.
But one of the things that's also nice about this, and I'm glad you prompted this, is with the old method of just a DCV reuse period, that puts all the control on the side of the CA. I DCV you, and then I can choose not to do it for up to a year. What if you want me to do it more often? You don't have that control. Once we move to static DCV, now the control goes back to you. You can set an expiration on that record, or you can just go in later and edit it and take that out and force DCV to be redone from scratch at that time, right? Because the CA has to do DCV every time, if you want more control or if you want to make a change after the fact, you decide, I'm not comfortable with that old DCV record for whatever reason, I want to have a fresh one, then you can do that.
Yep.
Right? And yeah, MPIC, you were going to say.
Yeah, I was going to say MPIC is we've talked about that before. That's another thing that is changing with DCV, right? So MPIC is, and MPIC for everybody who's maybe not aware, is multi-perspective issuance corroboration. It's a system designed to help guard against certain types of internet attacks. The idea being some actors could potentially attack us as a CA and cause our view of one of these domain validations. We might look at your DNS record. There might be a way to intercept our request and spoof the result. And so we are going to issue a certificate incorrectly because we've been spoofed on this domain validation. So MPIC is a system whereby we have to check these DCV records from essentially multiple random locations around the world. Not entirely random, but multiple locations around the world, different networks, so that if someone is able to get into the path of being an attacker, it's actually very difficult for them to do that. I won't say impossible, but incredibly difficult if we are checking it from 5, 6, 7 different locations and they all have to corroborate. It's quite a complex system on our part. And, as Tim and I both know, we've spent many, many months rolling this out and testing it. By and large, it seems to be very successful. We don't seem to have seen too many problems with it, but it is going to become, well, it's already prevalent, but it's going to be used in more cases, as we'll talk about in a minute. So basically everywhere where we have to do DNS checks, MPIC is going to be something that we have to look at and we have to check from multiple perspectives for safety, basically, to make sure we're not being attacked and make sure we're not misissuing certificates.
And also the number of perspectives we have to use goes up over time. So today we only have to use 2 perspectives and it has to agree with one of them. But then that will go to 3, 4, and we're going to have to agree with more of them as that grows over time. So that's another aspect of this. And yeah, speaking of MPIC, so let's talk about SMIME and MPIC, Nick.
Yes. So traditional DCV checks and CAA checks are going to be done from MPIC, as we just talked about, basically.
Right.
So we, an MPIC is this, multiple location check, and with this new, well, this is ballot 67, isn't it, Tim? This is for the.
So maybe this is a better chart
as well. This is a better
SMIME,
chart. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. So we are going to be doing it for SMIME as well, essentially, because obviously we're issuing publicly trusted certificates. We're doing it for email addresses instead of DNS names, which is still DNS based. And again, we want to make sure that when we issue these certificates, and the thing I didn't mention before, it's not just DCV, it's also, as you put on that previous slide, Tim, it's CAA checks as well. So certificate authority authorization. Those are the DNS records that you as a domain holder can put in place to basically say which CAs can issue for your domain names. So you could put Sectigo on there and we can issue for you. And if you have that record but don't have Sectigo on, we aren't able to issue your certificates. And so it's about giving you control. And we have to check those from multiple perspectives as well to make sure we're not being spoofed.
And interesting point, which is we've talked about DCV reuse, but CAA checks, there is no CA check reuse period. So we check that every time with every cert. So that's constantly being checked. And if a CAA check can't be performed, the cert can't be issued. So so as we see, MPIC is progressing in 2 ways, one of which is the number of perspectives we have is going up, as you can see. March 15, it's going to be 3, and at least 2 have to agree. June 15, it's 4. December 15, it's 5, and they're going to have to continue to increase, and they're going to have to agree. The other thing is, though, that in addition to SSL TLS, it's also applying SMIME. So we're going to have MPIC for all this. So MPIC is just kind of the new normal. As we've said in the past, this isn't really something that you as a subscriber have to act on. This is really something on my side. But nonetheless, it is a very important change in the industry. And so we like to keep you informed.
Yep. And I think that one quick thing to say on that as well that I was going to say is it's something that we don't expect people to have to make changes of, like you just said. And thankfully, we haven't noticed too many problems. But I will say, if you are aware that your organization is doing anything, let's call it special with your DNS. So, for example, you might choose to only have your DNS work in the countries in which you do business. So you might be a North American business. So you figure if someone tries to look up my domain name from France or from the UK, I'm not going to respond. You won't be able to do that. You will have to make sure that your DNS is globally accessible and provides the same or the correct answers globally. Otherwise, you won't be able to get a public certificate at all, not just from Sectigo, but from any public CA, because it's a public certificate. It can be trusted by everybody in the world, regardless of where you choose to do business. And so your DNS will need to be accessible from the world over. Thankfully, not too many of those, but worth noting.
Another great example is sometimes people have automated cleanup scripts where they put up the shared secret, they put it in your DNS or on your page, and then once that is accessed, they take it down, right? And that's cleanup is nice, but the problem is if we have to look from multiple perspectives, if perspective number one comes and finds the secret and then you delete it, and perspective number two comes along and can't find the secret, then now you're going to have a problem. And so if you want to do that kind of thing, automated cleanup is great, but you don't have to clean it up the second it's used. You could clean it up tomorrow, let's say. And what that would do is that would prevent that kind of outage. So there are some things that could happen on your side that will cause this not to work. And those are two good examples. All right, so we did just have a CA browser forum meeting in the month of October. And so this is things from the meeting in general, stuff that's going on in the certificate world that are worth knowing about that didn't get caught anywhere else. So the first one is that code signing will have a reduction in term the same way. We've seen reduction in term for TLS, we've seen reduction in term for SBIME, now we're seeing reduction in term for code signing. So today it sits at 39 months, it's going to go down to 460 days, which is basically a year and a half. And that goes into effect March 1, 2026. As Nick mentioned, if you buy a 3-year code signing cert, if you buy one today or you bought one yesterday or you buy one in February of 2026, that'll be fine. That'll work for the full 3 years. That's not going to be a problem for you. But starting March 1, the maximum term is going to go down to 460 days. Yep. All right. Number 2 is a lot of changes to roots. So roots for a long time were kind of wild and woolly. And as we've mentioned, browsers specifically, or most particularly Chrome, are trying to untangle these things and make them predictable and uniform in their application and more focused and more singular in their purpose. And so part of this is that these root term changes are coming. You want to go ahead and walk through this, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one, I think. And again, as you said, Tim, this is Google's proposed policy. And so I think one of the things that I'm sure you were going to point out, but I'll do it anyway, is some of the language in here. It's language that's often used in kind of internet documents, RFCs and things, where you have like may and must and should and could. Should is used a lot here, but should is one of those things that, well, for me, it has 2 meanings. Number one is you kind of really must do it unless you've got a good reason not to. But we also see that should has a habit of becoming must in the next revision of the document. So I just want to be clear that although this says should today and it's a draft, that doesn't mean it's kind of a, oh, you please do this. It's more of a, you probably should because you're gonna have to.
Get prepared for this is what.
Yeah, or you should not have a reason to not do this. It's that kind of thing. So with that context, the things that Google are proposing, number one is that there really should be a maximum of 2 root CAs per owner. Well, what does that mean? Well, we as Sectigo, we do have a few different root certificates, but at least as far as the Chrome program, which is 60 to 70% of the browsing world. As far as that program is concerned, we, I think, have kind of 3 routes today, but realistically, there's only 2 of them moving forward already. So we'd be, they want CA owners like Sectigo to have 2 root certificates in the program. Generally, 1 RSA key and 1 ECC key, so 1 of each. For some CAs like ourselves, it's not really a problem. There are some CAs out there that have a couple of problems. I think number 1 is they already have a lot of root certificates. Some are just legacy ones, some that they've included multiples at a time, and they have a lot of different root certificates. Not so much of a problem if they're not all in use, but if they are all in use for different sectors, there's going to have to be a way to consolidate those. The other thing is, of course, it says CA owners here, and Google consider CA owners like an entity that controls them. So there are some CAs who are owned by other CAs. They're still listed as a separate CA in these programs, but they are actually legally owned by another CA. And Google consider them a single entity. And so they are going to, again, have to merge those roots down into a single one. For most users, for most people listening to this, it probably shouldn't be a problem. It will be a problem for people who are perhaps curating their own trust stores or doing something interesting like that, which we would very much advise against. But for the majority of people, and certainly for Chrome users and Google Android users and the rest, there shouldn't really be a problem. It just means that your CA might make you change from a different route to another one, and might issue their CAs from a different route over the next, I don't know, 12 to 18 months, perhaps a little bit longer. So that's one change that Google have proposed. They also do want us to rotate those a bit more frequently, every 5 years. We used to be able to issue root certificates valid for 20, 30 years and probably expect to use them for most of that lifetime. That's gone now. We're largely looking at rotating roots every 5 years.
And that's not necessary now. Like 20, 30-year roots are a function of a time where the way roots got on a system is that somebody literally got a CD and put it in a drawer and installed software, right?
Yeah.
So, and we used to walk into stores, right, and buy software in boxes. And that used to be how roots got distributed. And under those circumstances, get a root on a system, you're pretty happy. You want to use that sucker for a while, right? But that's not the world we live in anymore. And so that kind of thing just isn't necessary these days.
It needs to be more frequent, and the pace of updates. Like, we used to install Windows service packs and things like that, right? We used to update everything. Now, Chrome has frequent automatic update every 3 weeks. My iPhone, I think, updates once a month at least. So the world has moved on to a faster update cadence, and so it's not really too much of a problem. Again, these changes are things that CAs have to do. We want you to be aware, because a bit like with the MTLS, there are people that do things like certificate pinning and custom root stores and other practices. I would like to get you on a phone call to explain to you how bad and dangerous they are, and please don't do them. Unless you're doing those, you shouldn't be impacted here. The last 2 are about the sub CAs or the issuing CAs from those routes. They should have a lifetime of 3 years, which I think most CAs generally do. We still do. So the 3-year lifetime is not too bad. But Google are suggesting we need to kind of cycle those through every 6 months. Right. Yeah. So if you have a specific sub CA, we at Sectigo have branded ones for various partners and customers that we work with, white labeled ones. They've traditionally had them and used them for multiple years, and then we've cycled them every few years. It's going to be a more frequent occurrence. Again, shouldn't make a difference to most people, shouldn't make a difference to anybody who's set up with automation. Download the certificates you give me, because the root and the issuing CA shouldn't matter. They will all be trusted. They just need to be installed correctly. So they shouldn't be a problem, nor should the last bullet, which to me seems quite a funny one. I like the idea, by the way, on that last one, Tim. I think it's a great idea. I think it keeps people agile and on their toes. But randomizing the CA. So you request a DV cert from Sectigo. It could be on any one of 5 or 10 different CAs, intermediate CAs, all of them equally trusted, all of them function exactly the same, but you won't know which one it's issued on until you receive the certificate and then install it. And again, if you install things correctly, you have automation, you will not notice a problem. But it will be interesting what happens if it weeds out some of these problem areas.
Well, and where it may be a problem is custom root stores and pinning, and that's kind of the point, is
exactly, yes,
to get us away from those things. because those things break us in other ways, right? Custom
Yeah.
root stores and pinning are bad practices that will hurt the ecosystem as a whole. And so this sort of makes it sufficiently difficult that I think their hope is that people won't do it.
Yeah, exactly. We hope so. And hopefully that'll
All right.
weed those ones out.
So let's give you an update on PQC real quick. So there's a few things that have gone on. This is focused on the CA browser form world in particular. So first of all is that CA browser form has passed a ballot that allows MLDSA to be used in SMIME certificates. However, these algorithms are still disallowed by major root store programs, so we still can't actually give you SMIME certs to do it. But CAB Forum is prepared for the day that that occurs, and under those circumstances, that will happen. So I guess that's some progress. Microsoft has opened up a post-quantum cryptography pilot program, which they expect to be live by the end of 2025. And what happens is that CAs can create designated PQC roots with a short validity period for TLS only, and then those will be usable on the Windows stack. So if you want to get these, they don't view this as a production environment thing so much as a next step in development and preparedness. So when this program comes together, the promise is that you'll be able to take these, you'll be able to put them in Windows environments and test them out and see how they work inside of those environments and see if they're working correctly or what needs to be changed. So that is available. I expect that we will participate when there's a thing to participate in. Right there now, there is not, but that's coming, and let's keep our eyes peeled for that. And when we get to the point where you can actually do something like this, we will let you know. That's on the way. And then the last one is really interesting. So there is a belief that certainly the Chrome team holds that the new PQC architectures will basically not work and not really be fixable with our existing paradigms because of key sizes and handshake timeouts, right? Handshakes and timeouts. And so they're just too big and too slow. And so there is a new proposal that would restructure the key exchange process entirely, and it's enabled by Merkle trees to make it work correctly, and it can eliminate a lot of the exchanges, a lot of the back and forth. And Chrome and Cloudflare are big proponents of this. But if this winds up being the standard, and this winds up being how we do it, the basic way we do key exchange will be different from traditional PKI.
Yep.
And this is not yet determined. And so until something like this gets determined, you can use ML Chem certificates inside your own environment, your own sandbox, if you have software that will support it. But commercial software that's going to be distributed widely and be generally used in an interoperable open internet just can't be made until this gets figured out.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. I mean, I think the Microsoft's PQC pilot is interesting. They say it's TLS only. One of the things is the TLS only. As you said, Tim, the signature sizes and the key size of the certificate are just too impractical for use on the modern web today. Yes, there's a lot of people like you or I with nice, fast machines and fiber connections into our homes, but there's a lot of places that isn't the case. And MLDSA certificates simply won't work on the web, and Merkle Tree is something that is a suitable alternative. So it's good. Microsoft are trying one thing. We will try with them.
But it requires the retooling of like everything.
Everything. Well,
it's hard.
As we've talked about on the quantum stuff before, a lot of things are going to need retooling when it happens. I'm going to go and live in a cave when it happens to get out of the way, but it's going to be interesting. And a lot of these things are going to change, and we'll just have to see how it all pans out.
So super fast. If you're interested in this kind of thing, I co-host Root Causes, the PKI and Security podcast. You can get it wherever you listen to podcasts. We have new episodes up every week. I put one up yesterday. And please come and join us where you'll hear about all this kind of stuff and more. And I told you we had a lot to cover. We have 2 minutes. Leah, can we hit some questions real quick?
Yes, we have a couple. Let's try as quick as possible. In use cases where applications require MTLS across the internet, how are those certs being addressed since an internal PKI solution wouldn't suffice?
Yeah, I think I tried to. Thanks, Lee. I think I tried to explain that one earlier. I think MTLS with public certs is a bad idea. You're not authenticating anything. So the use cases where they are doing it across the internet should be replaced either with a different kind of authentication or with a private CA that's operated by the party that's doing the authentication. So if I run an API that my customers are authenticating to, I should run a private PKI and provide them with certificates so I know who they are and they're authenticating with me and not just telling them to, again, have fingers and go and get a certificate from any other CA. So we will see those solutions be replaced by proper usable authentication systems instead.
Great. What about the lifespans of CA certificates like root and intermediate certificates?
Yeah, that was a question early on. I think we covered that just in the last few slides there, is they are going to be reduced down. We are going to see root lifetimes themselves are not going to be reduced, but they are going to be cycled more frequently. So even if a root is issued for 20 years, it's probably only going to be in use for 5 or 6 of those years. So we will see both of those come down more frequent, though of course nowhere near 47 days. That just doesn't work. It is impractical. But we will see the lifetime of roots and intermediates come down, yes.
I'll finish up with one hopefully very quick question. Will web browsers still accept certs with lifetimes over 47 days at the end of all this change?
Unlikely, no. Many of these policies are kind of requirements change. So if we issue a cert longer than 47 days, we risk our position as a public CA and we may be distrusted. But also many of the browsers do also tend to enforce this programmatically as well. And they've had time to develop that. So they probably will enforce it. Yeah.
For public certs, I don't expect a browser, there's no indication that browsers are going to put in hard limit for things on private roots. So if you're using it for your internal systems and for some reason you have somebody accessing that and you have a custom root store and it's on that system like an employee, and that's going to be more than that number of days, they have not suggested that they're going to limit your ability to do that.
Yeah.
It's just
private
going to
will
be
be
for
fine.
public certificates.
Public will not. Yes, exactly. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Great. We're running out of time and we'll get back to any unanswered questions separately. Thank you everyone for your time. Thanks, Tim and Nick. If you have any more questions, do get in touch with us. Also, we have another webinar coming up in December for 47 days, so please feel free to join that. But for now, thank you and have a good rest of your day.